What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/. All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, we are 2 days away from the 2024 NFL Draft. And, well, with Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan talking yesterday, we get a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of insight on where this team sits just 48 hours out from pick one of the NFL Draft. Meanwhile, we've been asking for a day or two now, a couple of days, for you guys to toss us your mock draft submissions. We're going to go through them and kind of break down what ones are realistic, what ones aren't realistic, and where the Steelers currently stand. Tomorrow, we will be giving our final mock draft. Exciting times. Nick, I mean, the drafts, we've talked draft for months now. It's finally here. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling great. It's a great week. I mean, first of all, I'm a big NHL guy, so the fact that we got NHL playoffs every night is really straining my sleep. But the fact that it's finally NFL draft week, I was talking with Steven Thompson yesterday before we started our episode, and I said, this is the second year I've really gotten into it, but this is the first year I really understood the entire process and was able to go through and be able to enjoy it fully. And it is long as far as the process is concerned, but it is always fun, and I'm very excited to see what actually happens this weekend in Detroit.
Yeah, it's a blast to spend 2-3 months just really diving into it. Experiencing the different aspects of it. That's what it comes down to. Is you go to Mobile, you figure some stuff out. Then you go to Indianapolis, you figure more stuff out. You go to Orlando for the league meetings, you figure more stuff out. All along the way, the team's just dropping breadcrumbs and trails here and there. And then draft night comes and you realize, holy crap, we were totally wrong about everything. That's the best part of the NFL draft. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, they love to do it to you. So I'm glad that you got to kind of immerse yourself in it this year. It is a great time. The Steelers, they're finally here. And yesterday, I think they dropped a little bit of something here and there. And I think there were two things that really stuck out. I mean, the first one is obviously the offensive line, the position that everybody keeps talking about, the position that everybody expects the Steelers to target in round two. And then the second one is their draft board and how they go about it. And I think it's really important for everybody to kind of understand exactly what the Pittsburgh Steelers do when they are sculpting their draft board and how they go about just filling out that first round and understanding where they stand going into Thursday night. Let's start with the center. We have talked endlessly about the Pittsburgh Steelers adding a center in the 2024 NFL draft. And it started with Jackson Powers Johnson. It went to Zach Frazier. It's ending maybe with Graham Barton. And there are everything under the sun when it comes to the center position in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Meanwhile, every single time you ask about it, every single time both Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan address the situation, they talk about position flexibility and how they have guys who they feel comfortable with because of their position flexibility. Yesterday, they said it again. Omar, real quick, short answer. Well, we have guys that we feel comfortable with in that position just in case, and, we feel good about where we stand there. Let me ask you this question before I give my thoughts. You hear that for maybe the fifth or sixth time this offseason. How many more times do they have to say it before maybe your brain starts to think maybe they really do like James Daniels and Nate Herbig and maybe Spencer Anderson as their center options in 2024?
It would have to be my ringtone on my phone for me to actually believe it and hear it that many times. I don't believe them for a second. Now, maybe Nate Herbig as a backup center, but at the same time, I think they've talked endlessly about how they like to do smoke screens. I mean, Mike Tomlin said it yesterday. Sometimes I just talk to people to mess with y'all. And yeah, he does. And we all know that. But the continued, well, we like James Daniels, who has been very good for them at right guard. And they also say they like Nate Herbig. And it's like, really, we all know that this is one of the better center classes that we've seen in the NFL draft for a couple of years. And you have none on the roster whatsoever. So yeah, you can like those guys, and it's probably just to lead up to the fact that they're going to draft somebody and they're not going to give them the starting role right away. But at the end of the day, I don't believe that's going to take away from them drafting a center probably Thursday night, or if not Friday night.
Yeah, look, I want to say I agree. I want to say I agree. I just think that after yesterday, with how quick and assertive the Steelers' answer was, my brain immediately went, maybe they're really going to do it. Maybe they're really going to look at it and just say, like, James Daniels, our center. And I'll say this to the argument of James Daniels at center. James Daniels is a natural center. If you were starting his NFL career over, you start that guy at center and you let him just develop into a center throughout his NFL career. That's where he plays his best football. That being said, I wouldn't touch him now. I wouldn't move him now. I think at some point the Steelers have to just look at the situation and say, the more we move offensive linemen around, the less they work out. So maybe we should stop doing it. I think that with the options you have in this draft, I don't know how you don't go with the center. I'll also say that, at this point in the draft, there are only two people, I believe, who really understand where the Steelers are going to go with their first round pick. And those two people are Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan, maybe three with Art Rooney. And those three aren't going to say a word to anybody. But there are a lot of people, a lot of sources out there who will tell you that they firmly believe the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go with an offensive lineman in round one. And that's every time I talk to anybody who I rely on for information, their answer is, I'm almost positive it's going to be a center or an offensive tackle with the 20th pick. It just kind of depends on how the board falls, I believe. But I don't know. There's a part of me that's starting to think like maybe, and maybe the smoke screen is right. Maybe you're dead on there. Maybe this is the Kenny Pickett effect. This is maybe that's what they like to do. Maybe that's Mike Tomlin's new thing is he's just like, I'm just going to avoid everybody and you're not going to have any understanding. And then boom, we're going to draft a center or we're going to draft Kenny Pickett. Or, I mean, you could go as far back as Juju Smith-Schuster. They did nothing with that guy and then selected him in the second round. They do that quite a bit. So I don't know. As it comes to, who they select, if you're selecting somebody outside of those top three, I don't think they're a starter in 2024. So maybe that's what they mean is they're leaving the door open for a later round option. But I think if it's the first round and one of those guys are there, I still have a hard time believing that they're not going to go center with pick number 20. Before we dive into some NFL draft submissions, some mock draft submissions, let's talk the other part of this. And that is the Steelers NFL draft board and where they currently stand and how they kind of formulate their plan, because I think that that's very important to talk about at this stage. We're 48 hours away. The Steelers, as of, I want to say like Friday, they typically finalize their board last Friday. They sit down, okay, this is it. This is what we're looking at. It's all said and done. We're going into Thursday. We're feeling really good about this. The way they go about that is they line themselves up. They do not mock the entire first round team by team. Instead, they simply just mock themselves. If we were the Pittsburgh Steelers and we had pick number 1, who would we select? If we were the Pittsburgh Steelers and we had pick number 2, who would we select? And so on and so forth. That gets them to 20. Now, what that allows them to do is if they are at pick 20 and there are guys 15 through 20 still on the board, they're looking at it and saying, there are still 5 names here that we feel comfortable to this pick. That allows us to consider moving backwards if we believe that those 5 guys, and I don't know what Omar Khan's number is, but I do know that Kevin Colbert's was 5 guys. If there are 5 players that the Pittsburgh Steelers feel comfortable with, they will allow themselves to move back 5 spots, understanding that those 5 guys will still be there, or at least one of those 5 guys will still be there. In this situation, I don't know what Omar's number is. I don't know how many picks he's willing to move back. I mean, you could talk about Kevin Colbert willing to move back, but the team hasn't done it since 2001. So, kind of take that as you will, I guess. Those guys, those brackets, that mock draft that they do themselves allows them to have a firm understanding of where each guy lies on their board instead of just an NFL draft board, because I think that changes everything. They no longer have to guess about who's going where and who's going to be available at 20, which a lot of guys, ourselves included, when we created our big board, you looked at it and we were talking, okay, is that guy really going to be there at 20? The Steelers don't look at it that way. They say, if he is there at 20, awesome. He was 13 on our draft, so let's go for him. That being said, the Steelers do not move, and Omar Khan said it yesterday, you will not move away from a good player. You will not trade yourself out of a pick if there is a good player available, and I don't think as of right now, my expectations are that the Steelers will move out of 20, but I do expect them to get a ton of phone calls come draft night for that 20th. I'm talking a ton. I would imagine that the Pittsburgh Steelers get more phone calls for pick number 20 than any other team in the first round, just because of where that sweet spot is. And Tomlin talked about it yesterday. Like 20 is just historically where it's that drop off. So if you're looking to move up, 20 seems to be where you're at. As we sit here today, Nick, let me ask your thoughts. What are the odds Steelers make a move in this draft?
Looking at where they're at, I know we've talked, especially all last week, we really dove into the trading up versus trading back, and it all ended with, Steven saying that he would trade back, but it's kind of hard to find a spot to trade back and get all your needs handled.
Yeah.
So I think especially that combined with looking at the way that they haven't traded back in a long time, I don't know if they would. Do I think they would move up? Potentially, but at the same time, you look at the crop of players that are going to be in that 15 to 20 range, you're going to have a couple of options remaining, even if a lot of those names get taken in that range. So I think it's probably best if the Steelers stay put, and I think it's more likely the Steelers stay put. Would it be nice to get a little bit more draft capital in the second and third round this year? Yes, it would, because you have quality players that are going to fall to the second and third round. But honestly, with all this talk, it does certainly feel like as we get closer to the event, they're just going to end up taking the 20th pick overall.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think that they're willing to move backwards and kind of lose out on immediate starter quality. This is top 20 pick material. I think if there are a lot of guys there and somehow the board shakes out differently, like if Zach Frazier goes 19th and you're looking at it and going, well, that shouldn't have happened. If Kool-Aid McKinstry somehow flies his way up the board, if like stuff like that starts to happen, like 8 or 9 wide receivers go in the first 20 picks, then at that point you're thinking, okay, there are just way too many options here. But if 20 falls as it should fall, the Steelers will probably have 2 or 3 guys that are like, okay, this is top 20 material, and I don't see them moving out and going anywhere else, outside of that 20th pick, just because they don't want to lose out on talent. And I agree with you. I think that the way I stand right now, we're looking at the 20th pick in the NFL draft. But that's how they go about things, and I'm sure things will change, and it's always evolving, but I don't know. Trade conversations will start probably tomorrow afternoon, lead into Thursday morning. Nothing will really heat up until the clock actually starts at 8 o'clock on Thursday. And I expect Omar Khan to. I mean, we've talked about this many times. Omar Khan does not stop working. I can only imagine what that phone is. Sometimes I put my phone down, and you know this, you cover sports. Sometimes I put my phone down and just to show somebody. Like I'll be talking to my mom, or like I got family members all the time who try to do it, and they'll be like, no, no, you're probably exaggerating a little bit about how busy you actually are. And I'm like, nah, I'm really not. And I put my phone down just to show them, and it's just all day long. I could only imagine. Like Omar's phone, I'm surprised his leg doesn't shake because his phone is just going crazy in his pocket at all times. It's just the guy never stops. Never stops. All right, let's answer Michael's question real quick. Michael, we appreciate you, man. 3 questions. Bold prediction for the Steelers in round 1. Bold prediction for round 1 in general, and the Steelers' first round pick. Love the live streams. We appreciate you, Michael, as always. I'm gonna ask your opinion on these 2. Bold prediction for Steelers in round 1. I'm gonna say my bold prediction is they pass up. Oh, this is tough. I'm going to say my bold prediction is maybe not super bold, but I'm going to toss it out there anyways. My bold prediction is the Steelers are not considering a wide receiver whatsoever. That they, no matter who is on the board, they will avoid a wide receiver at all costs. What's your bold prediction for round 1?
Honestly, I know that we just talked about the fact that they're looking at a center, but I think my bold prediction is they end up going with Jackson Powers Johnson. I mean, everything has led towards Graham Barton over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe even a month and a half. Everything has started to lean towards Graham Barton, but I do think that it comes back down to what did they like on day 1 and who was the biggest guy on day 1, and that's Jackson Powers Johnson. And then you get into this whole process, and it's people trying to say, well, he has this issue and this issue.
Yep.
And some of that might be, well, maybe you shouldn't take him because he has this issue, but we're not all that worried about it in reality. So my bold prediction is they actually go out and they get the guy that was projected to be the number 1 center instead of going for the guy in Graham Barton that's kind of come up the rear in the last month or so.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. I like the logic there. Sometimes we get carried away and we lose what the beginning of this draft cycle looks like. And the beginning of this draft cycle was real heavy on Jackson Powers Johnson. And we're not talking a year ago. I think that people get that confused as they go, oh, well, a year ago, Jeremiah Trotter was a first-round pick. Now he's like the third. I get that, but we're talking 2 months ago. Things don't change that much in 2 months. Some things do. I don't think a guy falling from like round 1 to mid-round 2, maybe that's more media than it is actual coaching staffs. I get that. I like that a lot. Bold prediction for just round 1 in general. I'll give you my bold prediction is that the Steelers, they might have almost no offensive tackles to choose from come pick 20. That Armarius Mims, J.C. Latham, Troy Fatanu, who popped up with a medical red flag yesterday, according to SI's Albert Breer. All of those guys off the board by 20. The Steelers are left stranded when it comes to an offensive tackle. That's my bold prediction for round 1. What you got here?
My bold prediction for round 1 is Cooper DeJean is going to go way higher than everybody's expecting him to. I mean, when you hold when you hold that personal pro day, you get all eyes on you for the entire day. And when you're somebody that was already a projected top, first round pick, and you get those eyes on you, and the questions were the reasons that he was so far down in the first round was, well, where's his health? He comes back as fully healthy. He gets that pro day, basically the last laugh going into these pre-draft visits. I feel like he's going to fly off the board because of that, especially because, like you mentioned yesterday, I think it goes hand in hand with Quinion Mitchell going much earlier. It's going to get people a little jumpy. It's going to get people to want to take their cornerback and make sure they get their cornerback. And I think Cooper DeJean's the one that's going to get tabbed in the top 15 for the NFL draft.
Top 15, man. Yeah, I love my boy Cooper DeJean. I'd be all about that. Look, as long as it's a cool team, I'm all about it. I'm player before team at all times, and I just think Cooper DeJean is the most undervalued guy in this draft class. I really like the guy is so ridiculous. It's so, like, I don't know. And I'm not alone with that. Like, I was turned on to him by NFL scouts and NFL coaches, and I said, nah, come on, what are we talking about, dude? Iowa corner, they're good. No. Yeah, okay. Cooper DeJean, I love that one. And then the Steelers' first-round pick, we'll end it there, and then we'll dive into some NFL mock drafts here. Steelers first-round pick, if I had to guess today, I'm going Graham Barton.
That is the safe pick to me. I mean, that's the pick that, as much as the bold prediction side of me feels like there is more of an eye on Jackson Powers Johnson than they're leading on, that they do actually have a conversation and a debate to have. I do think that when you look at what everybody's talking about, if you're trying to put your money down on it, which that's what, when I say, what's your prediction for the first round pick? That's what I would put my money on. I think the safe bet is Graham Barton. Although I do think that there's more to the Jackson Powers Johnson train that the Steelers are letting on.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And it would not surprise me whatsoever if the Steelers went Jackson Powers Johnson. I was like, oh my God. Well, they did it with Kenny Pickett 2 years ago. Everybody, I remember sitting right here in this room because we actually did a draft special on this show, and me and Derek got off like 10 minutes before the draft. I didn't have time to shoot over to the facility on night 1. So I watched it here, and I had the story written up. Steelers select Malik Willis. Here it is. And I'm watching. I'm like, there it is. It's coming. It's falling right to him. Kenny Pickett picked number 20. And I was like, there's no chance, pal. They weren't even interested. They didn't even care. They didn't even know who Kenny Pickett was. They forgot he lived next door. And there it is. I could see that happening. I could definitely see that happening. All right. So over the last 24, 48, 72, whatever since Friday is, we've been asking you to submit some mock drafts to us, some Steelers mock drafts. If you have one and you want to toss it in the chat, would love to see it. We're going to dive through the ones that were submitted beforehand. And then if there are some unique ones in the chat, we'll dive into those too before we answer everybody's questions like we do at the end of every live stream. Nick, let's start with the ones that were in the comments yesterday's podcast before we dive into those on the community page.
Yeah, we'll kick it off with Brandon722 on YouTube. He started with the 20th overall pick, going Cooper DeJean, cornerback out of Iowa. 51, okay. He took Zach Frazier out of West Virginia. 84, he took Mason Smith out of LSU.
Okay. It sounds like a Noah Strackbine draft right here.
It does sound like, it sounds like he listens to the pod pretty frequently. 98th overall goes with Blake Fisher, offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. 119, he took Tyler Smith, the safety out of Georgia. 178, he took Curtis Jacobs, linebacker out of Penn State. And the
Okay.
last pick, 195, he took Jordan Whittington, a wide receiver out of Texas.
Okay. Okay. So love Cooper DeJean at 20. Think that's a sleeper at pick number 20. We've talked about it many times how there is a short list of guys who I don't think the Steelers will pass up, and I think Cooper DeJean is on that list. Zach Frazier at 51, no move. Would love that to happen. Mel Kiper says he's going in the top 50. I mean, that one pick, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. Maybe he's going 51. Would love to see that. Mason Smith, stud in the third. I think that's my new favorite pick in the third round for the Pittsburgh Steelers is Mason Smith. I think if they could land Mason Smith and he doesn't go higher than anticipated, that dude comes in here. So it works out perfect for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have Dean Lowry, who you could say, you could not know Dean Lowry. You cannot dive into, that's fine. He's an average defensive lineman, but he's got a ton of starting experience and he starts in the NFL. And I look at that situation and I think Dean Lowry could actually become the guy that oversteps Larry Ogunjobi this season. Larry O is gone after this year. I don't know what's going on with Cam Hayward. To get a guy like Mason Smith with no expectations this year, none. Maybe he plays the middle. Maybe Montravius Adam plays more middle and he plays more of the outside. Maybe, DeMarvin Leal gets moved on from. Who knows what the solution is. I think that Mason Smith is so versatile and in a year from now is ready to start, that he's a guy like when they drafted DeMarvin Leal in the third round, I thought it was a good pick, but DeMarvin Leal was a first round guy that fell to the third round. Mason Smith's a fifth round guy that climbed his way into maybe the second round of the draft. And I think that is massive. So I would love Mason Smith. And then Blake Fisher. I mean, I think Blake Fisher's got potential. I don't think he's a starter this season. So you got to be okay with Dan Moore Jr., but I'm not super upset with those picks. All right. What other one we got there?
We have another one here from Kyle. He says 20th overall, Graham Barton, offensive lineman out of Duke. 57th, he traded back with Tampa Bay to get from 51 back to 57 and add pick 125. And at 57, he selected Jalen Polk out of Washington, wide receiver. At 84, he took Trevin Wallace, linebacker out of Kentucky. 98, a new name for you that you've been liking the last couple of weeks, Mike Sanderstill, cornerback out of Michigan at 98. 119, he selects Bucky Irving, running back out of Oregon.
Let me tell you this. Let me pause you right there. I met Bucky Irving at the NFL Combine, and me and that dude were just chatting it up, walking through the halls or whatever. And I asked him, I said, what's your expectations going into the draft? Blah, blah, blah. Where's your mind at? And he was like, dude, I don't even think I'm going to get drafted. He's like, but the team that takes a shot on me, they're going to love me. And I was like, I love you right now, pal. I think that you're awesome. He was you could tell that dude's a running back. We got off the escalator and the guy that was behind us was like, who was that? I said, oh, it's Bucky Irving. He said, I don't know who that is, but that dude's a running back. And I said, yeah, he looks like a running back. I think he's going to be a stud. The rest of those, I don't mind that draft. I like that draft. I like the trade. I don't think you're getting Sanderstill at 98. I think that he's a second round pick at this point. I think he's going to climb way too fast. I think the rest of that, I mean, to get a linebacker in the third round, I'm not upset about. I think that works out well, especially because yesterday Omar Khan Mike Tomlin didn't really have like a really good update on Cole Holcomb, and I'm starting to get nervous that Cole Holcomb's not going to be ready for the start of the season. I would not mind an inside our linebacker. I think the rest of that, Tyler Polk is an interesting name. I like Jalen McMillan a little bit better, and I think they'll both go right around the same time. But the rest of that, I'm not super upset with. I think that that's a good one that has some potential and is a little bit out there. To go Graham Barton in the first round and still be able to make some trades, I think is massive. The rest of it, how it falls. And I love Bucky Irving. I think if you get your hands on Bucky Irving, I'm all about a running back in this draft. I think the running back class is not going to start high, but has good potential later in the draft. And I think that's where the Steelers should aim is, hey, how do we get our hands on a fourth or fifth round running back and try to turn him into something? I like it. I like it. I'm a fan of most of that draft. I don't know if Cameron still is going to make it as far as 98. But if he does, that's no questions. You sprint to the podium. That is your pick. No questions asked. That's all that we had in that podcast.
In those
correct?
comments. Yep.
Okay. Let's there's some in the community page that I'm a big fan of.
Okay.
I thought some were real interesting. This one from this is Kara Paulette 561. My apologies. Brian Thomas goes number one. A trade. There are no specifics here, but we're going to go trade up for Armarius Mims. Zach Frazier. Oh, trade back into the first round for Armarius Mims. Zach Frazier in the second. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in the third. I'm guessing you're giving up your other third round pick to get back into the first round. I'm not upset with that at all. Brian Thomas in the first round. I'll say this. I'm not sure that the Steelers are going to go wide receiver in the first round. I think that's almost out of the question at this point. I just don't feel good about it. Albert Breer put it out yesterday that the Steelers are not looking at wide receivers in the first round. I've heard a lot of the same stuff, is that the Steelers, it's not even a smoke screen. They just haven't shown any interest in wide receivers in the first round outside of AD Mitchell. I don't mind Brian Thomas. I think he and Mitchell are the most realistic options if they're going to go wide receiver in round one, but I just don't think it's going to happen. Armarius Mims, if you trade back in, is a good one. Zach Frazier in the second round is great. And Jeremiah Trotter in the third round. Look, I think Jeremiah Trotter's got the most upside of any of these inside linebackers. I'll say this. Edrin Cooper out of Texas A&M, he's the guy to watch, because if you're going to talk smoke screens, the Steelers love that guy, but they have put almost zero effort into scouting him. None. They have not gone to his pro day. They haven't shown up at the NFL Combine to talk to him. Nothing. They didn't bring him in for a pre-draft visit. It is simply, we love this guy, and if he's available, we will feel good about him, but that's about it. Jeremiah Trotter would be a good one. I mean, I think he's got a ton of potential here. There are a lot of Armarius Mims in the first round. I think Armarius Mims is still a really safe bet in the first round. My only issue or worry there is it goes two sides. Maybe we're reading too far into the injury history. Maybe we're reading too far into and the Steelers don't feel the same way. Maybe we're not reading enough into it. And the fact that the Steelers did all this and tried as hard as they possibly could to get their hands and their medical staff and everything as close to Armarius Mims as possible kind of lets us know that there are some major concerns and we don't know what direction they're going to go in. Are they comfortable with taking an offensive tackle in the first round that may only last a couple of years in the league because of injuries? I mean, Troy Fatanu's the same way now. People are saying that his long-term outlook in the NFL might be a little grim. I don't know how sold the Steelers are at using a draft pick with so much potential in other places to get a guy like Armarius Mims. Just to toss a couple more out here. This is a trade with Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh gets 26-57. Tampa Bay gets 20 and 119. The Steelers go Graham Barton out of Duke. Then they trade again with Washington. Pittsburgh gets 40 and 139. Washington gets 51 and 98. This guy's making moves out the butt. Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia. Jalen McMillan out of Washington. Chris Abrams-Drain out of Missouri. And LD Bertrand out of North Dakota. Finishing it off with Javion Cohen out of the University of Massachusetts. One of those two.
Michigan.
I don't mind this draft. I think it's a lot of moves. I think it's a lot of craziness to get subpar, we'll say, results. You know, maybe I'm thinking a little bit different, but Graham Barton, great pick. Tyler Guyton, I'm not sold on. Lassiter he's slow. He's real slow. Jalen McMillan, I'm a big fan of at 84. Chris Abrams-Drain, I'm a big fan of. But I just think overall, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. What's your opinion on this? But I'm not a huge fan of making moves to get Guyton and Lassiter. I just don't think that those guys really improve your stock much.
Yeah, I'm at the same spot as you. And this is already, we talked about trading back. When you trade back multiple times and end up with, I mean, Graham Barton at 26, I feel like would be.
Yeah, it's a great move.
It would be a great move, but realistic wise, I'm not sure where you're at on that one. Tyler Guyton and Lassiter, for that to be your tackle safety combination or secondary combination, to me, I feel like that's just a bit underwhelming, especially if you're moving to get to that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not I'm not. I like the effort. They used PFF, so you could see Graham Barton there. I think PFF is one of the most realistic ones at this time of the year because a lot of those simulators don't update throughout the season. I don't mind. I like some of the picks, and I think it fills the needs. But if this happened, I don't think fans would be like, "Man, that's a great haul." I think they'd be like, "Man, that's a little underwhelming." Just a little bit. This is another interesting one that I want to talk about, and then we'll dive into some of the comments here. Trade back for capital. The Steelers, they send pick 20 and 98 to Carolina for 33 and 39. Don't mind that one at all. They get Jackson Powers Johnson at 33, Troy Franklin at 39. Love those. Patrick Paul at 51. Renardo Green at 84. James Williams at 119. Don't mind that one at all. 178 for Christian Boyd and Joe Milton at 195. Just to break up the first three here. Love Jackson Powers Johnson at 33. Love Jackson Powers Johnson at 33. Love Troy Franklin at 39. Troy Franklin is a stud in this NFL draft. That guy is, I think 5 years from now, we're talking about Troy Franklin more than we're talking about any other second round wide receiver in this draft, just because I think he's got that much upside, depending on where Ricky Pearsall goes. And then Patrick Paul, I think if you could get him at 51, that's not bad. I'm not a big fan of Patrick Paul, but for 51, not terrible. To go center, wide receiver, offensive tackle, not terrible. James Williams, I love at 119, and then Christian Boyd at 178, I also love. There's some good ones. All right, let's dive into some questions and some interesting mocks in the group or in the chat here.
We did have a couple mocks. We'll start with those. Mikey says round 1, Fashanu. Round 2 at 51, Xavier Legette. Round 3 at 84, or Horoho. I don't know how to say that name, but that guy. Nice. Round 3, second pick, R. Green. 119, you take Cedric Van Pran out of Georgia, and you take Braid at 178.
Look, if Cedric Van Pran somehow slides his way to 119, that's a great pick. I like a lot of this draft. I like Fashanu at 20. I love Fashanu at 20. I love Legette at 51. I think that's a real possibility. The Van Pran's the one that sticks out to me here. I think at 119 is such a steal. If you could get a center that in a year from now is probably a starter in the 4th round, that's as good as it gets right there. We're talking about, who did we put Hunter Norzad on our big board yesterday in the 4th round or at the end of the 3rd? If you could wait another round to get Cedric Van Pran, massive. I don't know if he falls that far, but I would love to see him fall that far. Fashanu at 20, I think, is one of those guys you don't pass up if he's there, even if the Steelers haven't put much effort into scouting him. Big fan.
Steven also has somebody at 20 that you probably wouldn't pass up on. Steven says, pick number 20, Quinion Mitchell.
There's just
pick number 51, quarterback Bo Nix out of Oregon. Pick 84, Peyton Wilson. Pick 98, Javon Bullard. Pick 119, there's Bucky Irving again. Pick 178, Garrett Greenfield, and 195, Brennan Jackson.
Look, if this draft somehow happened, it would be remarkable. The problem is that Quinion Mitchell's going to go 10 picks earlier. Bo Nix is going to go a full round earlier. Peyton Wilson's going to go a full round earlier. The rest of them pretty good. But, I think of it, if we were dreaming, if we had to pick best case scenario for the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is in contention. This is up there for first 2 picks. This might be as good as it gets. Maybe three picks, because I think Peyton Wilson's going to be fine in the NFL. I mean, Quinion Mitchell's the guy. He's never going to make it to 20, but he's the guy. Bo Nix isn't going to make it past Denver. So I'm a big fan, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Tyler has number 37 being Zach Frazier. The trade is with LA. I believe he also put in the chat a little bit later. So he swapped picks with LA in his mock. Zach Frazier at 37, Ricky Pearsall at 51, Mike Sanderstill at pick 69, Blake Fisher at 84, Jeremiah Trotter at 98, Brendan Rice at 119, and there it is, and received LA's second rounder in 2025.
I don't mind getting a second rounder. I don't mind Zach Frazier at 37. I love Ricky Pearsall at 51. I like Sanderstill at 69. I don't know if he's going to make it that far, but I do like that one. And I like Blake Fisher at 84 and Jeremiah Trotter at 98. Even Brendan Rice. You get a good wide receiver at 119. I'm feeling pretty good about it. I don't know if the Steelers are going to move back that far and feel comfortable with it, but I think that that's not a bad place to be. Ricky Pearsall is potentially top 5 favorite guys in this draft when it comes to realistic options for the Steelers. So I would love that. I think there's, if we're going to talk like real shots of the Steelers moving up for a wide receiver, I think Ricky Pearsall trading up into the early parts of round 3 or even like the real late parts of round 2 to go get Pearsall, I think is an actual possibility.
We got a question / mock here. Ryan asks, what if they trade back with Arizona, get 28 and 35, grab Mims and Kool-Aid, then take Frazier at 51, then grab the best wide receiver left in the early third? All our needs are filled with high quality players.
Okay, so let me break this one down here. If you trade back and get 38 and 35 and then grab Armarius Mims and Kool-Aid, then take Frazier at 51, I mean, look, I don't mind it. I don't think you're getting 35 in a pick with just giving up 20. I don't think that's, I think after 20, like to get up from 20, you might have to give up a 3rd round pick, a 2nd round pick. Like when those rumors were going around with Buffalo, it was like, yeah, you take that, no doubt, because that's never going to happen. Like, you know, you're not going to give a 2nd round pick, especially 35. Like 35 is essentially another 1st round pick. That's as good as it gets. If they can pull that off, I mean, you know, Omar Khan is a legend in the city of Pittsburgh. Build him a statue tomorrow. I don't think it could happen. If it does happen, I love Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think that's definitely a name to watch. And I'm a fan of Mims, even if he's got issues. If you could get him at 28, I feel a lot better about him than at pick 20.
We have one more mock and then a couple other questions we'll get to here. But the last mock we have up here right now is Nick Bowden says AD Mitchell at 20 and then Frazier at 51 is one of my favorite scenarios. Then you take a tackle with the 84th pick.
So, Nick, I got to start off by saying Frank the Tank as your profile picture is awesome. Big fan of Frank the Tank. AD Mitchell at 20 is, I think, like I said, if there are 2 wide receivers that I think are actual possibilities for the Steelers in the 1st round, it's AD Mitchell and Brian Thomas Jr. I don't think either of them are actually going to happen, but I think if we're going to, you know, everybody's wrong until once the draft actually starts, everybody's wrong. So when I am wrong and they do go draft AD Mitchell or Brian Thomas, I'll admit it. But for right now, I don't think they're thinking wide receiver. AD Mitchell is my favorite of the 2. Frazier at 51 is a steal. And then take a tackle at 84. Yeah, I think there are options there. Blake Fisher's a good one. Maybe Matt Goncalves out of Pitt. That's another good one. I think there are options. I like that one.
We have a couple questions here, some pertaining to the offensive line, so we'll start there. Adam Carson says, any chance the Steelers go after David Bakhtiari and not have as many pressing needs going into the draft, or is that more likely an after the draft acquisition?
I think it's only an after the draft acquisition. I don't think they think about it during the draft. It's the same with everything. It's the same with, you know, going out and signing a Connor Williams or another wide receiver or a corner or whatever. They're going to wait until after the draft to make any other moves. Right now, David Bakhtiari, I don't think he's an option, but if the draft comes and goes and they're looking at it and saying, we need somebody, we don't trust Dan Moore, maybe he's a guy that comes in here and fills that role. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think David Bakhtiari is phenomenal and has a lot of juice left in the tank. And if you could come in here and play left tackle and you got to keep Broderick Jones at the right tackle, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I think it's a upgrade over Dan Moore Jr., certainly. A real possibility. I'm not going to say that right now, but it would an interesting option for sure.
Richard Hunt says, are we just going to go James Daniels at center, Herbig at right guard, and then hammer Brian Thomas in the 1st round?
I don't think we are. I mean, I don't think we are. I think James Daniels actually has a better shot of playing center this season than Nate Herbig, and that's crazy to say, but I think that part's true. Brian Thomas in the 1st round, I don't see happening. Maybe, but I just don't see their interest in wide receiver. But to address the first part, I think James Daniels has a better shot of playing center this season than Nate Herbig, which is nuts because the guy's entering a contract season. And if I'm James Daniels, I'm not happy with changing positions the year I'm supposed to get paid from these guys.
And Richard had a second question as well, saying, if Barton hasn't played center in a couple of years, what's the difference between him playing center and moving Daniels to center?
Exactly what I just said. It's a contract year for Daniels, so Daniels isn't going to be pleased with changing positions. I wouldn't be pleased with changing positions. We're talking about millions of dollars here that you have to go out and earn, and if you're trying to learn a new position, it's not that great. The other part of that is James Daniels is already in the NFL, and Graham Barton, I get the whole, like, he played center at Duke for a season and then he moved to left tackle and now he's got to move back to center. But that's where he's going to develop in the NFL. He's going to become a full-time, long-standing center in the NFL. James Daniels had the opportunity to do that. They didn't do that. He played guard. Now he has an opportunity to be there for X amount of years. It's just the least amount of chess pieces you have to move, the better for any piece of your offense, and especially the offensive line. So to just say James Daniels is your right guard, that's cool. Now just fill a center is a lot easier and a lot less risk than saying James Daniels is going to move. Maybe James Daniels doesn't work out. Now we screwed up because James Daniels, we don't have a center again, and we just lost James Daniels, whereas we had a right guard. All we had to do was add a center, and there were center options. So I think that it makes things more complicated to move somebody who's been here for a while and who has become familiar with the offense in one spot than to train somebody new who has no experience and you're starting fresh in that center position.
Joe wants to know, could the Steelers do an AJ Brown type draft day trade for either a center or a wideout?
I mean, I think maybe. I thought the Brandon Ayuk Instagram thing, fireworks in 6 days, was interesting. I'm not totally sold that Brandon Ayuk's going to be in San Francisco. I've been getting heat on that all day. I walked into the press conference yesterday. Mark Caboli walks by me. He goes, "Oh, I heard they're trading for Brandon Ayuk." I said, "Yeah, I heard the same thing, actually. Thanks, pal." I think that's still alive to a degree. I don't know if it's going to happen. I would say round 1, chances are it doesn't happen. Round 2, those chances are more realistic. I'm going to say after the draft is when like that stuff starts to become real. I could see San Francisco taking a wide receiver. I've talked to people in San Francisco who have said there are a lot of mock drafts who really believe the 49ers are going to add a wide receiver in the first round. If they do, things become very interesting over that 24-hour gap between day 1 and day 2. I'm not going to say no. Round 1, I'm going to say no, though.
More wide receiver questions from Still Cold says, do they double dip at receiver in the draft?
I don't think so. Maybe, but that's not something they typically do. You know, even the Calvin Austin, George Pickens here, it was just Calvin Austin was there and you couldn't pass him up. And I could see a possibility, like a situation where that happens again this year, where there's a guy sitting there in the 4th round that they go, I don't know how you made it to the 4th round. I think the Steelers are locked in on one guy, bring him in here, be the number 2, still try to add a veteran after the NFL draft, and hope Calvin Austin is your wide receiver 4, and then everybody else is your wide receiver 5. I think they feel okay with that. I don't expect them to double dip. They're saying, can they? They could, but I don't expect it.
One last wide receiver question here from Lindsay says, who do you think the Steelers will get for wide receiver if they don't end up drafting somebody this weekend?
I mean, if they don't draft anybody, my guess is still Brandon Ayuk, and it's going to remain Brandon Ayuk. Like, it's not there. If they don't go out and draft a wide receiver, I mean, all the alarms should go off in everybody's head that they have something in place and it's big, you know, and it's not, maybe it's John Mechie big. Maybe it's Noah Brown big. Maybe it's Robert Woods big. Maybe it's, I don't even know who else is on the market big. Maybe. I don't know how, if they don't draft a wide receiver, everybody's mind immediately doesn't go, they got to be on the phone with San Francisco somewhere, you know? And I know that that's becoming a crazy thought, but I think it's less of a crazy thought if John Lynch isn't out here like preaching to the choir that they're super close on a deal and then making Brandon Ayuk look a little crazy on social media because he's clearly not close to a deal.
If this happens and they don't get a wide receiver, do you think there's a chance they circle back with Tyler Boyd, or do you think that bridge has been burnt?
I think that bridge has been burned. I think I think it's done. I don't think the Steelers want Tyler Boyd. I don't think they ever really did want Tyler Boyd. I think that they looked at him as like we'll toss a contract at you and see what happens. But I don't think that they're looking for Tyler Boyd to be an answer anywhere in Pittsburgh.
We got a question here from Adam says, if JPJ falls to the 2nd round, being Jackson Powers Johnson, why don't the Steelers just trade up in the 2nd to get him?
I mean, I think they could. I think they very much so could. I think that if Jackson Powers Johnson falls to day 2, that 24-hour, I think that 24-hour period is going to be very, very interesting for the Steelers. You have 2 third-round picks and a 4th-round pick. And 2 6th-round picks. I just think that the possibilities are endless, and to move from 51 up to like a really good spot in the second round is a possibility. I think that a trade is, I'm not going to say certain, I'm not even going to say likely. I'm just going to say that if you had to guess that the Steelers were going to make a trade, where would it be? It would be in round 2, definitely.
Pittsburgh Hornets has a couple. Let's start with this one. Tomlin knows people's eyes are on him. This would be a perfect time for deception. How much do you think Tomlin will deceive, and what do you think the biggest fake out this offseason will be?
I think the biggest fake out this offseason has already happened. I think it's the Steelers' lack of attention at center, and at offensive tackle. It's their continuous support of guys like Nate Herbig and Dan Moore Jr. And I just look at, they've put so much effort into this offensive line over the last 2 seasons. So much effort. Why would you just say, okay, well, we got pretty close. We're done. That was cool. We had a good time. Let's start Nate Herbig at center. Let's start James Daniels at center. I don't think that's real. I think that in their heads, they want to finish their offensive line and the rest will fall into place. I think that's the biggest deception. I don't think they're doing a good job at it, but I think they're trying. I definitely think they're trying.
Second question from Hornets here says, every year at least one team busts on a first round pick. Which team do you think will have the biggest bust in the first round this year?
I think it's if somebody takes Armarius Mims or Tyler Guyton before they should. And that stinks to say because that might be the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I'm not high on either of them. I like the upside. I don't like Guyton at all. I'm not a Guyton guy. I don't think he's a first-round guy. Armarius Mims at least is young, raw, needs to be developed, but he's got so much upside. Tyler Guyton played his college career, his entire college career, and just didn't play enough because of injuries. And I think that you're battling age on top of injuries, on top of lack of development when it comes to Tyler Guyton. Armarius Mims, you just don't know what's going to happen. So I'm thinking it's whoever drafts one of those guys earlier than they should be drafted. If you draft Armarius Mims at 25, I mean, there's no bust material at 25. Busts happen all the time at 25. If you draft him at 17, you draft him at, I think 20 might be the cutoff. That's an iffy line to walk. Then maybe you could consider that a bust.
We got one more here. This one from Rick says, any chance they throw a big wrench into the mocks and draft Edgerrin Cooper?
I think maybe that's a possibility. I think they do like Edgerrin Cooper. I think Edgerrin Cooper is a name that I said it earlier in the stream. I think the Steelers love Edgerrin Cooper more than any inside linebacker in the draft. And I could see him being, I could see him being an actual option for the Steelers. Maybe in that second round, maybe in that third round, depending. It would take a lot, but I'm not going to say no to tossing a wrench out there and getting an inside linebacker.
Let's finish off with this one, actually, because you got one from Richard. He says, if Ayuk isn't traded by the draft, is that deal dead?
No, it's very much so alive. It's very much so alive. I think that's the biggest misconception here, and that's why all this if I showed you guys my DMs on social media, you'd laugh because it's everybody just telling me that I'm an idiot and that, oh, well, the draft's here, no trade has happened. I don't think it's going to happen during the draft. I never did think it was going to happen during the draft. I was told that it's not imminent and that it's a 50-50 shot and that it could happen at any point this offseason. And I think it's very much so alive. I think it's more alive come training camp when Ayuk doesn't show up for training camp than it is during the NFL draft where everybody could talk about whatever. I mean, look if you're in the draft, those picks kind of increase their stock. But if you go past it, I mean, trading a second round pick for Brandon Ayuk next season is not out of the question for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm going to keep it there. I think that training camp is the most likely time the Steelers will make a move for a guy like Brandon Ayuk. Another wide receiver, I think that's more likely during the draft. But I'm telling you, I think the Steelers' option one is to draft a guy, and if it doesn't happen, things could certainly happen.
All righty. I think that's a wrap for today. As I look through real quick, I think we got them all. All
right. With that said, we're heading out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Appreciate all the mock draft submissions, all the questions. As always, we are 2 days away from the NFL draft, and what that means is tomorrow for the last time, we will be dropping our mock draft, the final product. I'll also be dropping my final mock draft on allsteelers.com. Very excited for that one. Hint, hint, there are no trades. So maybe there are trades. No, there's no trades. I haven't finalized it yet, but I'm not thinking any trades in this bad boy. With that said, we're heading out of here. Thank you guys so much. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/allsteelerstalk. Find us anywhere you get your podcast. Go check out our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/allsteelerstalk clips for even more All Steelers talk. And we will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.